Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is day one of the Racing Starts Challenge 2023. I'm Rebecca Caroe, and I'm joined as ever by Marlene Royle.
Hello, Rebecca, and hello to those of you who are joining us for the Racing Starts Challenge.
We love doing this event. It was an idea that we had a couple of years ago because one of the things that we know about racing is that it's been a year probably since you've done very much. And the thing that you get rusty at first is two things. One is your start, and the other is you forget how blooming hard it is to push hard in the race. We also think that starts are a particularly curious part of a rowing race because regardless of whether you're an Olympian or in your very first race, it's the same for everyone. We can all do the exact same strokes and there is no difference between it. So our job in a racing start is what we're going to talk about today. Today is day one. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you are, where you're watching from, who your challenge buddy is. I hope everybody has downloaded the workbook. The workbook is in the Facebook group. There's a little tab there that says guides. You go to the guides and in there's a PDF with your workbook that'll give you space to ask questions, put your ideas down. And remember, this is all about you and making this really work for you. So if you write a comment underneath the live stream, we can see it. And we will do our best to answer some of them. Today, Henry is going to be talking a little bit later on about his 2015 World Cup race, which was, I'm going to use the word unexpected, but I'll let him tell the detailed story. And then he's going to talk about what to consider in the warm-up. He's also going to talk about what are the things that might change on the day. But before then, let's kick off, Marlene, with the start. You're sitting there, you're attached, you're ready to go. What's the first thing that people need to think about?
I think the first thing you need to think about is not to overdo it and put an immense amount of tension in the handle and in the legs on that first stroke. So, there's a really fine balance between being effective and being overly nervous and overly exciting. So we want to move the boat, but we don't want to rip the water.
So your boat's completely stationary. Everyone knows that I'm not a physicist, but I do know that you have inertia that you have to overcome in order to get your boat moving. And we're only talking today about strokes 1 and 2. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about strokes 3 through to 8. For me, that very first stroke has to be strong and very firmly connected to two things. Firstly, my feet through the shoes onto the foot stretcher. And secondly, my blades, the cup of the spoon, locked into the water. So where do you get yourself so that you've got that lock up before you even start the first stroke?
Well, typically, a lot of people will sit at 3/4 slide for that first stroke and then go to half slide. But I think as a crew or as an individual in a single, you have some choice in terms of what works best for you. In the single, I actually found that half was more effective for me than 3/4 and half. But again, it's individual. And I think that is the beauty of the start, is that you have to experiment with these first two strokes and see what gets your boat moving without kicking it backwards. How do you get the heels planted? How do you get the body swing? And lock that water. So, again, you have to practice these first two strokes, I think, quite a lot.
So for me, what I like to teach my crews is to start, as you say, at 3/4 slide. It's a convenient place to start. It's a good sort of plain vanilla. Everybody will be okay there. And then you have to work out what works for you. my view is you should not lift your heels. So just while you're sitting and watching now, put your feet flat on the floor and then bring yourself squatting down onto them and see how far you can go before your heels start to lift. Because I believe you need that flat foot pressure in order to be as effective as possible, because you don't want any time delay. As soon as the buzzer goes, you want to be able to push straight away. Some people may find, as Marlene found, that half slide is better. Some may find they can get, closer than 3/4 slide to full compression. It also depends on how high your feet are. If your feet are set higher, it's harder to get to keep your heels down. If they're lower, it's easier to keep your heels down.
No, absolutely. I think that, feeling really stable on the foot stretcher is important, because you want the stability in the blade. And it's very important to also feel like you're connected to the pin. So one of the little secret details I know that we both practice is just, when you're ready and you hear the starter calling, pulling the cruise, pulling your lane. If you're, say you like to start at 3/4 slide, if you're just shy of 3/4 slide and then you hear the starter, they call your lane, they're moving on, that they're going to say ready row pretty soon. Just slightly back your blade so that you've got water pressure on the blade and you feel that sleeve connects to the pin and to the oarlock. So you want to make sure that you're already on the oarlock when you start to drive off the foot stretchers versus having to connect to it. It's just like when you're in the gym, they say, okay, slightly lift the bar to engage the plate and then go, versus having that little bit of play. So I think that's an important thing to practice on that first stroke, is just feeling like the blade is loaded and the pin is loaded.
Yeah, I think about it, rather than moving the slide, is just push your handles away from you, or if you're in a sweep boat, even 1/2 centimeter.
Yeah, it's really very subtle. Yeah, absolutely. It's extremely subtle, but it is the difference between catching the pin and having that immediate pressure so that you can work right off of the foot stretcher right away.
And remember, the person holding the stern of your boat is holding it solidly at this point. So if you push the water, you're not going to mess up the alignment of the cruise. Obviously, when the buzzer goes, they just let go. So you might go backwards a little bit before you go forwards if you haven't quite got this right. Moving around then to how do you feel in your body? You do need to feel quite strong. I row with a girl who likes to say, sit up, lats engaged, shoulders down. And she says it very strongly like that. But you want to feel that you have a solid connection. If you're one of those people who can hold your core firm, remember that's probably the soggiest part of your body. That holding your core firm and feeling tall and ready. And sometimes I wiggle my toes inside my socks so that I can really feel that, okay, yeah, these are my toes. Yeah, you can do it. And you can sort of almost...
You have to grip a little bit. Yes, absolutely. Tree frog-like.
Absolutely. But you need to feel that everything is like it's pre-stressed. It's braced, ready for that first stroke. So how do you do your first stroke?
How I used to do my first stroke. I don't race too much these days, but my first stroke, honestly, I really focused a lot on the connection through the feet and the heels, as we're talking about, making sure I felt the pin was loaded and I already had some pressure in the blade, and making sure not to go deep. Like in my mind, I used to think, I know this isn't like exactly technically correct, but in my mind, I used to think half blade. And if I thought half blade, my blade depth would usually be right where it should be, because it's, again, it's very easy to get overexcited on that first stroke and just do too much. So, you had to think about get the boat moving and then build it, which is what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of days.
I think this is a good moment for you to tell us the story of your start, your worst start.
Oh, everyone's going to love this one. So, as you know, I mean, I was a sweep rower before I learned to scull. And so as a sweep rower, we were always taught to flip our oars over backwards, I'll call it, to back down. And so here I am, just fresh out of university training, and I'm at a national team speed order race in Princeton. And it was quite windy, even though they always say Carnegie Lake is flat water. It's always been rough every time I've ever rode there. However, so it was a rough, windy day in April, floating start. And here I am, one of my first races in a single, and I'm backing down towards the stake boats. And I have my oars, spoons flipped around the opposite way. And so I'm backing down thinking, oh, this is all right. And then they said, well, we have a lot of wind. This is going to be a quick start. And they said, ready, all row. And ready, all row. And I'm got my oars the wrong way. So I'm going, oh my gosh, now what do I do? And I flipped my oars around, got them in and started going. And by that time, everybody was 150 meters away from me already at that point. And so, it was just dismal from then on, and it was rough water and everything. But that is the last time I have ever backed a boat down without keeping my oars in the same position that you row with them in. And I will never, ever do it again in my life. And so when people say, oh yeah, but you know what, when I back the boat down, it feels much more stable when I do it this way. I said, it doesn't matter when you're backing down into a stake boat, when you're backing down into your start, you never want your oars in the position that you cannot immediately row. So that was like Mike Teddy says, if you make, it's okay if you make a mistake once, it's one. It's not a mistake unless you do it twice. So the first time is a learning experience. The second time is a mistake. So that was my learning experience. I have never, ever done that again in my entire life. So.
Curiously, that's one of the differences between rowing in New Zealand and rowing in the UK. In the UK, the way I was taught was exactly what you described. You turn your oars upside down to back. In New Zealand, they don't. They leave them the same way up and they back. Quite different.
But if you think about it, if you are in an emergency, I mean, just from a backing into the start and up, it's a floating start. Maybe they call go, you're ready to go. Or if you're in an emergency situation, and all of a sudden you have to move away from an object, you want to be able to row. So I don't really see the advantage in flipping your oars the other way, other than it takes more time if you need to react to something.
Sounds to me like Mike Tatey would say you're a star pupil. You never make that.
I never did that again. Oh God. Oh dear.
That's what your heart rate must have been.
Oh, I mean, you're going, I mean, it's like one of your first experiences racing, the big guns, right? And then you're just like, oh, well, I really blew it. So, I think everybody goes through that, and I think one of the benefits of the Racing Start Challenge is to start to create a framework that you can experiment with these, maybe you'll get some new ideas how to approach the first couple of strokes of the start as we go through the next 3 days, and experiment and find what works best for your physiology, for your mentality, for your crew. Everyone's, some people some people are nervous. They need to dial it down a little bit. Some people are low tone. They need to activate it a little bit. So, you have to understand a bit, how do you find that happy balance, happy medium to get out clean?
Which brings us neatly to the difference between style and technique. Marlene and I row somewhat differently stylistically, and I'm going to tell you that I do like to go deep on that first stroke. I don't want to have the smallest chance that my blades will wash out of the water. and I want to make sure that I finish off the first stroke really solidly. So unlike her, and she likes to think about being only half buried, for me, I like to feel that they're quite buried and that I draw that first finish quite high. And that ensures that the spoons stay under the water, and that I then have to do a deep tap down to make sure that they get out of the water. And in an 8 that I've been rowing in recently, we like to be deep for 3 strokes, just to make absolutely sure that we've got the water connected and that we send the boat off level. So these stylistic differences are exactly the reason why we think that the Racing Starts Challenge is helpful, because it allows you to hear more different ways of doing things, and then obviously to go and practice and work out for yourself what you're going to do. So your first stroke is really slow. A big mistake people make is that they think it's a high rate stroke. It really is not. It's probably single digits in terms of rating. It's slower than you think, and it does not matter that you feel that it's slow. What matters is that you go from start to finish, catch to extraction solidly, and that you get a clean extraction. Now, Marlene, let's talk about how to move on to the second stroke.
Well, the important thing, as you mentioned, regardless of how you need to cue yourself in terms of blade depth on that first stroke, because as you said, you may focus on going deep. Another person may need to focus on, oh, I need to not be so deep, because maybe they tend to over exaggerate it. So that's going to depend on what you need. However, that extraction has to be clean and a bit exaggerated, regardless of what your exact blade depth is on that first stroke. Because if you get caught there, it's going to interrupt your rhythm, it's going to interrupt your balance, and you don't want to feel like you're scrambling or playing catch up on that second stroke. So identifying what slide length works for you to make that stroke effective, I think, is really important. Some crews start at 3/4, as Rebecca said. That's kind of a vanilla envelope place to start. Works for most people. Then they go to half slide for that second stroke. So the first stroke is slow, half to pick the speed up a little bit more. Some people go half. Regardless, I think a lot of attention needs to be put on that second stroke, because it's so easy for that second stroke to be ineffective and not do anything for you. So you're so focused on the first stroke that the second stroke just kind of happens. And does it really work to help to initiate a little bit more momentum or not? So, the second stroke, I always found that was a really critical stroke. And it was so, as I said, like when I was practicing my own starts in the single, there were certain methods of that second stroke that I just found like, it just didn't work. I just missed it, and then there were other things that I felt like, okay, the first stroke, and then it helped me build up and then helped me make the transition to the next stroke, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a very tricky stroke myself.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy, and it's significantly different in different boat classes. The one thing I think many people get wrong is they don't finish off the first stroke before moving on to the second stroke. And when you extract the blade at the end of that first stroke, I like to think hands away, body over, and then rolling up the slide. Where you roll to on the slide is very much up to you. A lot of people will pick something around a half slide, but there are variants. And tomorrow, inside our VIP, which is the extra video live stream, which is going to follow this, which is a paid thing. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But in the VIP, we have 3 elite coaches, different starts, complete start sequences that we share with you. One of them is Mike Spracklin. One of them is Harry Mann, and I've completely forgotten who the third one is, but they're probably marvelous, and it's not me. But that second stroke for me is slower than you think, and you have to move on to it. You need a full body swing at the end of that first stroke. Take the oar out of the water, arms away, body over, and roll forwards. Do not rush onto the second stroke. So if you're practicing this overnight, and I sincerely hope that everybody goes away from today ready with things to practice, I'd like you to try stroke 1 and then stroke 2 half as slow as you normally do it. So it's twice as slow as you normally do it, so that you over exaggerate. Then do it again and maybe try it at what would have been your normal speed, and then try and find a midpoint between those two. The key is that the boat acceleration needs to be smoothly continuous and getting faster. If you imagine a bicycle upside down and you've got the wheel in front of you and your finger is here on top of the tire of the wheel, your first stroke is going to go from here to here and you're pushing the tire. Then you return maybe to only half slide, and your second stroke starts at push with the spinning tire already moving. So you have to be able to start moving your finger at the speed the tire is already spinning. Otherwise, you'll break the spin. And if you go too fast with your finger, you won't actually engage with the rubber of the tire and push it on. So it's kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can get faster. And you might actually want to even try that down at the rowing club. Get someone's push bike, put it upside down, and just try it and see how it moves. If you do this practice on an erg, you can hear the flywheel. Listen to that, and how loud it gets at the finish is a good indication of how hard you need to push at the catch of the second stroke to move it on, because you've got to take it from that speed and make it go faster. So the whole point about your first 2 strokes is overcome the inertia, get the boat moving, and definitely do not be in a rush.
And breathe.
Oh,
breathe. And I think, it's really important. Like, we're going from this initial slow stroke of getting this weight of the boat and the crew moving, clean release, build up the momentum, and, breathe. And also, like, make sure you don't have too much tension in your hands again, so that you keep that clean blade work, because you just want to be boom, 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 really in and out clean on these strokes. So it's a really fine line between overworking it and underworking it.
definitely. Anna Harvey asks, what start would you do in a pair, and would you bring the bodies in? So for the first 2 strokes, Anna, we're only answering the first 2 strokes question for today. Absolutely, yes, bring your bodies in. When I'm in a pair, I do start at around 3/4 slide, and my second stroke is usually at least at half slide, sometimes a little bit longer, because a pair is a slow boat. You can afford to almost take your time in these first couple of strokes. And by the way, I absolutely love pairs. But yes, definitely for those first 2 strokes, you want to use all of your limbs. This is not a time to be sitting upright or not fully drawing your arms. And another question, I'd have thought you get more power and control by rowing almost entirely on the legs, i.e. limited body movement. Yes, you might, but I think you get more power if you use your back and your legs. Remember, that first stroke is about overcoming the inertia, and you want it to last as long as you can, as long as you have strength to propel the boat forwards, so that the boat is moving as fast as it possibly can. It's a very short stroke if you're only rowing with your legs, and your back and arms can successfully add boat speed. What do you think, Marlene?
I absolutely agree with you.
So whoever this is, please go and try it both ways. Definitely try it rowing almost entirely with your legs, and then also try it using your back and arms. I will say that when you try something completely new, the first time you do it, it's going to feel very odd indeed. So make sure that you do it at least 3 times before you discard that as being ineffectual for your personal technique. The other thing that you might want to try and do is get someone on the bank to video you. If you just pull in close to the pontoon and just get somebody to take video of your first 3 strokes, first 2 strokes today, then you'll be able to look at it in slow motion afterwards and make your own analysis, because what you feel in the boat and what you see sometimes are at odds.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to experiment and practice and see what helps you move into the second stroke the best way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the purpose of the first stroke is to get you to the second stroke, and to get the boat moving as well and as fast as you can. Now, we're going to just do a brief rundown of the VIP session, which is going to immediately follow this. This is an opportunity for you to get one-on-one with Henry, with Will Satch tomorrow, with Emily Craig on Wednesday, and to get your personal questions answered. In the VIP, we have also got some learning resources. So Faster Masters Rowing is a learning platform. It's an education place for masters who want to learn more about rowing for themselves. And it's set up like an online learning system. So there are lessons in there. Marlene, have you got to hand the lessons that are in the day 1 module? And can you tell the listeners a little bit about them?
Well, in our day 1 module, we have an exercise, which is the 2-stroke start exercise. And that is a similar exercise to, for example, like standing up drill, when you're practicing backing down and then loading the blade. We also have a drill called backing down into the catch exercise, where, just like we've talked about, don't flip your oars over the other way, keep your oars the same way you row with them, backing down, gathering the pressure in the blade, and then starting to initiate and change the direction of the boat. There's also a video of me out in a coaching launch, actually coaching a master's woman sculler in practicing the first stroke, the second stroke, and working up to the full stroke sequence. And that's a video that's included there.
Great. I will say that the prices, I'm sorry, are in US dollars, but that's a reflection of how we set the business up in 2019. So apologies for that. But once you buy the Racing Starts VIP, in there is a support ticket system, and you can ask us any questions for the lifetime of your ownership of that product. So you buy it, it's there for you forever. You can come back to it next year. You can ask us anything if you have particular challenges, if you have a little video you want to share. We will definitely be there to answer your questions. Thank you to the people who are watching live who have got more questions lined up. That's exactly the point about this. And that's why we know that this is so useful.
And Rebecca, a couple other things that we have in there before we go on to Henry. We have a lesson that's 12 exercises for speed work and starts. So that's a whole battery of different drills and exercises that you can incorporate into your workouts. And we also have a really comprehensive reading list from a lot of the world rowing literature, and pulled out sections of different books, have references of, if you want to read how different coaches approach racing starts. So we have a really comprehensive resource list there as well.
You're going to be a world expert on all of the racing starts, and then all you've got to do is practice, really.
Yeah.
Now, I'm delighted to welcome Henry Fieldman, our elite guest for today. Henry is a coxswain with British Rowing, probably doesn't need much introduction. But Henry, you've got some news. You've switched crews this year.
I'm coxing the women's 8 for the European Championships. Just got announced today. So
awesome.
Yeah,
it's a huge team. I saw the photo. Like, there's lots and lots and lots of rowers. You must be entering every single event.
I think we're trying to. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we've got a good team. We don't really know anything about anyone else or even us, but I can tell you the women's 8 feels pretty good at the moment, but that's all I can really say.
You've got some of the girls from last year's 4 in it.
Let's see. We have one.
One.
One of them is in the 8.
Okay. And so what's the top boat on the women's sweep side?
I mean, obviously the women's 8. No, I don't know. I think it's probably. I mean, you've got like. I don't want to sell anyone short. You've got world champions in a few of the boats. Perhaps you see Helen Glover as the sort of superstar of this team, and she's in the 4 right now. So maybe you look at the 4. But I think that's on the sweep side, and then sculling's a different matter, of course. But yeah, I think all the boats should be reasonably strong.
Now, Henry is going to kick off with a particular story from 2015. Off you go. Take the floor, Henry.
Yeah, thanks very much. I thought I would just try and pick a story where I learned something about starts, and the one that came to mind was back in 2015. I was coxing in the GB team. I was pretty new in the team, and I'd been given the chance to cox the 8 at the second World Cup race in Varese it was, and I'd only raced in the GB8 in over 2K once before, so this was my second time, and I didn't really know what to expect so much, and so it was a great race. Definitely, have a look at it if you get the chance. But so we kind of you do the warm up, and you kind of get on the blocks, and it was quite a hot field. We had the Germans there who were they've been good for a long time. They were there. The Americans had brought an 8 over. The Kiwis. I think the Australians were in there, and maybe Italy as well. So it was a really, really strong field, and we're in the final. And you're kind of there, and there's that like wonderful kind of tension. It feels like a Clint Eastwood movie almost at the start line, where it's sort of silent, and then it kind of fires off, and then all the coxes are kind of going. And so we're sitting on the start line, everything's in place, everything's all good, and we fire it off. And like for me in an 8, I sort of try and keep my eyes like locked forwards as we go off the start, because I want to make sure that if there's any kind of turning forces, I'm keeping it where it needs to be. And we're trucking off the start, and I kind of straight away I kind of feel this is really, really good. This is really going. And there's this kind of hustle and bustle. I haven't really had a look out yet. I'm just kind of like, I can just see that we're in the pack, we're in the mix, 5 strokes in, 10 strokes in. We're just going through the procedure. And then I check the speed, and the speedo is saying 108. And I'm thinking, that's like, we haven't seen it that quick yet. That's pretty fast. That's our fastest start we've done so far. And I'm there thinking, it feels great. It's really fast. And then I look out, and we're last. We're in dog last place through the 500 meter mark.
Oh dear.
And I'm kind of thinking, oh my goodness, it feels good, and the speed says it's good. I guess the GPS could be malfunctioning here, but I know it feels good. And then the race kind of went on, and we kind of went through into the next 250. We're coming through 750, and then we're starting to kind of inch through the field a little bit here, and but we're still like a good way off the lead. I think we're maybe in 4th or 5th, something like that. And but then what basically ends up happening, kind of long story short, is we end up winning the race. But the sort of the key lesson is that the start, it's not about, when you're trying to like learn to do a start, or you're practicing your start, it's not about, and this is my main lesson really from this experience, is it's not about kind of getting to the front of the pack at the end of your start. It's about putting something in place in your race plan, in your delivery, which gets the most out of what you can do. And hopefully that's winning, but it might be, coming 3rd or whatever. But it's about having that part of your race that puts you in a position to get the most out of yourself. So for us, what that meant was, like, we did enough to kind of be in the pack, but the rhythm was so strong that we could then work on the things we needed to work on to get us to pick through the field. So I remember for us, as we came through 750, I kind of thought, okay, it's pretty good. But I think we can roll it out a little bit more. And the rhythm was so strong that we could make these technical changes and get and make them together and have a positive impact, and then you can kind of start moving through the field even more. And so I think, and I think that's one part of it, and the second part of it is that you're sort of we were in the pack, but not in an expensive way. We were in the pack in an efficient rhythm. So other people, to be at that speed, were having to spend more money than us. So yeah, I think absolutely. I'm not saying don't kind of go all out at the start, like, really put a lot of effort in. I'm just saying that be really clear about what it's for. It's not about getting to the 250 first. It's about getting to the 2K first, or whatever race you're doing.
That is a fantastic summary. And you used a really useful phrase there. Don't be too expensive. Now, the concept there is you've only got a certain number of oranges to squeeze between the start and the finish. And if you spend all your oranges at the start, you may be short when you get further down the race course.
Absolutely.
Now, Henry, I'd like you to take us back to before the race starts, because as a coxswain, you have this unique insight as being both an athlete yourself. You've got to mentally prepare yourself to do the race, but you also have a job organizing your crew and ensuring that everybody's doing the same thing at the same time. So when you're in the boat park and, it's obviously quite a while before your race, what are you starting to do at what time that gets the boat on the water and ready? And then later on, guys, we'll ask Henry a little bit about warming up. But let's talk now about the bit before you actually get the boat on the water.
Well, I guess you sort of almost start like before that, and you kind of you'd have a think about, obviously, your job that day is to deliver your best race from the time that your race is on, which is obviously a predetermined time, and then you kind of work back from there. And so we need to warm up, and what is the warm up? Well, this is all kind of practiced in training. So the contents of the warm up is practiced way ahead of time, and I won't go into too much detail of what that is, but that absolutely needs to be practiced. And I would say that as you do practice it in the weeks or months or whatever running up to whatever performance this is, get a clock on it. This is really important for timing, for setting up your day. So, and that might be you need a bit of variation in there, because as you're out there in the real world, perhaps you're kind of doing a warm up and someone's in the way or whatever, and you need to account for that. But I'd say get a rough idea of the time that it takes for you to do what you need to do, and then you're kind of almost like working back from there. So your race start is this time. It's going to take me this amount of time to do my warm up. So we need to be hands on at this time. We need to be having our final chat at whatever time it is. And then, of course, you can't forget the human element that, like, people need to go to the loo and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. This all takes time. Absolutely. Right. All these, anything, or somebody forgets something, or, just
absolutely
plan an extra 5 minutes for something to go wrong. Right. So
totally. And as you kind of get to know the group that you're with a bit more, perhaps, someone kind of, like they like to, I don't know, do whatever it is, which takes a bit more time. And these kind of things need to be accounted for. So you're just kind of working your way back and back and back and back. And as you say, putting in a bit of breathing space on the schedule as well is really, really key. That's kind of, I guess that's it. The sort of short answer is just like working out your schedule and kind of keeping to it.
do you find that since you've worked with different crews, or this might be for different scullers, they need different amounts of warm-up time depending on their physiology?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because most of the time I'm in a big crew, and you kind of you're sort of trying to do something that kind of ticks all the bases for everyone. But so we probably wouldn't and haven't maybe changed the warm up for physiology, for that kind of people's different sort of physiologies. But we certainly have for like weather or like environmental conditions. So
temperature.
Yeah, exactly. So if for like in the UK, you can kind of get away with doing whatever you want because it's never that hot. But perhaps if we were racing, like we did a race, we did the Worlds in Sarasota in 2017, and
Yep.
the Olympics in Tokyo,
Yeah,
and
in
it's
September,
very
so it
hot.
could be quite warm and quite humid, right? At this
Absolutely.
and some wind at the same time, right? So
Absolutely, and then you have the trade-off of like, well, do we want to? Could we maybe have a little bit less water time, do a bit of warm up on the land where we can kind of keep hydrating, and maybe wear something that keeps us cool. So yeah, absolutely. I'd kind of we would think about the environment that we're in and tweak the schedule, tweak the plan to kind of put us in what we think is the best position for us.
So what things might change on the day? You're a very experienced racer. You've been in lots and lots of different situations, and you have to respond on the fly if something happens, and not something trivial like someone gets in your way and you have to wait a little bit before, doing another burst or something. What are the things that might happen and that are worthwhile changing your warm-up for?
Well, I guess if I think back to a few times in the past, maybe a recent time would be we were kind of I was coxing the Cambridge veterans boat for like the veterans boat race, which is like a load of fun, and we kind of we had you're on the tideway on Thames in London, and there's quite a lot of flow on it, and there's often a lot of wind and things like that. And I kind of like had an idea of what I wanted to do beforehand, warm up route wise. But then we got there, and then the wind wasn't how I'd expected it to be, looking on the weather apps beforehand, and the bits of the warm up route that I planned to use were suddenly kind of looking very turbulent. And then I'm there kind of thinking like it would be good to have a taste of that, but are we going to ship on water, which is going to really slow us down? And can we get rid of that water? Probably not. Okay, well, we're going to choose a different route, and that's going to be fine. And we're going to make the most of that, and then we'll race in the really rough stuff when we have to, but we'll kind of keep the water out of the boat where we can. So kind of, I guess that's like I don't know how relevant that example really is to people racing a 2K, but I think certainly looking at like what's the wind doing, what's the water doing, and how can I make sure that we're in the best position possible by the time we hit the start line is really, really key. I think maybe if another time, maybe there was a race in Belgrade, and I could see the conditions, like it was fine, but I could see this storm was rolling in. You sort of hope that it won't stop the race, but I kind of felt I'm going to have to. I think we probably don't have a lot of time to get the warm up done in good conditions. So I'm going to actually shift the priority pieces of the warm up early, get them done in a position or in water that I want to do it in, and then we'll kind of manage the storm as it comes. And so I think as a cox, you want to deliver something quite reliable, but you do want to be able to kind of pick those, adjust it when it's going to make a difference. And I think that those kind of things, like reading the weather and like little things like wherever you are, just as you're kind of sitting in the back of the boat, and it's probably the same for as you're rowing, just obviously keep your eyes on the boat, but like have a little look and see like what are the flags doing along the track, what's happening here. Is are things changing? Like how's as you go past like buoys on a river, like how much flow is coming off the buoy? Is it flowing in the way that it should be? Is just kind of just having that sort of finger on the pulse to the environment, so that you can warm up in the best way possible.
Yeah, I totally support a lot of that. I've had situations where it's been raining heavily or very cold or very windy, and I've tried to do more warm up on land, then get onto the water with a view to literally finishing my warm up and going straight into the start pontoons. One of the things, just as a tip, anybody, if you're late for the start, they will go without you, and nobody wants that. However, and this is a trick that you probably don't want to pull more than once, if you can see that your race is there and everyone else is like backing into the start and you're worried, if you row down the middle of the course, they can't start that race. And so I have literally rowed across. It's usually been in crew boats. We've gone into whatever our lane is, lane 3 or 5 or whatever, and then rowed down that actual lane and then turned and gone in. And we have had a warning, but actually they won't start the race. If you are in front of all the boats who are supposed to be racing, you know, it's worse than having a flock of geese.
Wow, I like that. And you do have two chances, right? So one, you're going to get a warning, and as long as you don't blow your start the next time. But I absolutely like what Henry said about shifting around the priorities. And I think for those who are racing singles as well, or in straight boats, you have to think about this. Like, what's the most important part of your warm up that you need to get in to get off that start well? And and sometimes, like you said, if you've got a stretch of calm water and then it's going to get rough, the last thing you want to do is be carrying extra water in your boat. So get in those key things.
You can bail with your socks. Socks are remarkably absorbent, and everyone is hopefully wearing socks, and you can literally scoop water with your socks and wring them out over the side of the boat. In emergencies, it's an okay way to get water out of your boat.
Absolutely. But keeping an eye on what's going around, and as things, especially if you've got weather coming in and flow changing or wind changing, getting in the important element that kind of sets you up physiologically and mentally to get into the start. You don't want your start to be part of your warm-up, hopefully.
Now let's go through what's going to happen in the private VIP. So when we go live there, you've got time to go and buy it right now, and you'll be able to join our Zoom. We're going to have a 5-minute break where you can just go to the loo or whatever you need, get a cup of tea. And then when we get there, Henry is going to talk about aligning on the start. He's going to talk about backing into the start. We're going to talk about what to do if you get a side wind. We're going to talk in some detail about the start that Henry did with his Tokyo men's 8. Not that necessarily every master wants to follow it, but you might be curious, and I certainly am. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that. He's going to talk about the heat at Tokyo with the men's 8 and the unexpected things that happened there, which I don't want to be clickbaity about it, but it's a pretty good story. Definitely worthwhile in and of itself. Plus, we'll show you around the learning management system. We'll show you the drills that Marlene was talking about earlier. You can watch them in your own time, but we'll show you where to find them, how to use them. We'll show you the support ticketing system where you can go and ask us questions. Henry, if people ask you questions, are you happy to receive them after this is finished and give some answers by email?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Before we move over there, quick question. Would you expend more energy on a start in a handicap 1K race and you're starting 7+ seconds behind? Really good question. Actually happened to me at the weekend twice. In one race, I was the oldest crew, and so we got to go first. And in another race, I was the youngest crew, and so we were the last ones to be called off the start. And I'll give you my answer. My answer is no. I do the exact same start. Obviously, you are keeping an eye on what's in front of you. So you need to, I always count how many crews are in that event, because it's not always the same number. And when I'm racing, my brain gets starved of oxygen, and sometimes it's really not very smart. And I literally I'm often in the bow, so I'm steering, but I try not to look around if I can't. But when I'm in my peripheral vision, I'm looking and I go 1, 2 over there, 3's right next to us. There are definitely 5 crews in this race. There must be 1 more crew. So I count the crews quite carefully. So after my start and when we're going through the race, I try and get a sense of where we are relative to everybody else. Sometimes I will sneak a look around and actually see where they are, because I try and work out which is the lane I haven't counted. And I know this is sounding really kind of like primary school, but trust me, when my brain hasn't got much oxygen in it, it's really not very good at thinking quickly in some situations. And so I actually will look around and go, okay, They're in lane 2. You know, they're only a length in front of us. Were they the ones that started first? Are they the same age group as us? Are they older or younger? Henry, what do you do? Oh, you wouldn't. Henry, you haven't done handicap races. I won't ask you this question.
You're not there yet.
Yeah.
Well, and Rebecca, you're talking about races where they're starting the staggered start based on the handicap. And in the US, there's one race that's run like that, which is the Gold Rush Regatta in Sacramento, which is coming up next weekend. But the other races, they all start the same, and then they figure out the handicap at the end. So sometimes that's really funky, right? So because then you just have to go for it. Whereas I actually really prefer this method, like you're racing and the Gold Rush is racing, because you're starting with the handicap. So who gets to the finish line first is clear. But some races apply the handicap afterwards. So it's a little bit, it's confusing. And they can do that in head races as well. And it's like, well, you just need to figure out how to row the best race, the fastest average over the course.
It's worth knowing what the different handicaps are, because
absolutely.
And also, as a rule of thumb, regardless of your boat, it's around 3 seconds per boat length. Doesn't matter if you're in a single or in an 8, roughly. So if you know there's a 6-second handicap and you're in one of the races that Marlene describes, you know you've got to be more than 2 lengths in front. So you've got to have your boat length plus a length of clear water and a bit more to be sure that you have won. So that is definitely something that adds a complexity. Henry, thank you. Been brilliant having you. We're going to call it to a close now. We very much hope that we will see all of you tomorrow when we've got Will Satch on, same time, same place. Please come join us in the VIP. Buy it now, and I will say this in public. If after the first VIP you think you haven't got value, just let us know and we'll give you a refund. So your risk is 0. Come and join us. It'll take 5 minutes for us to move over to the Zoom link. The Zoom link is the first lesson in the VIP program. When you get it, it's very clear. It says Zoom link, so you'll be able to find it. If you have a total emergency and you can't find it, get in touch with us using the contact form on the website. But I'm absolutely confident that we will see all of you over in the VIP in 5 minutes. See you shortly.
Sounds good.